February 10th, 2009, 10 years ago today, F.E.A.R 2 Project Origin was released. F.E.A.R 2 is a first-person shooter horror game developed by Monolith Productions, Monolith being responsible for the original F.E.A.R game, as well as games like the survival horror series Condemned, and then later going on to develop the Middle-earth games. F.E.A.R 2 is a game that is a true sequel to the first game. It's a game you can pick up and play without the first, but you'll be heavily out of the loop when it comes to the plot of the game. This game is often bashed and looked down on as a bad game, and the reasoning is because of how much it changed from the original. F.E.A.R 2 is clearly trying to pander to a different audience with this game, and when game studios do that, it tends to make fans of the first game upset. However, F.E.A.R 2 is not a bad game. In fact, it's a really good game, and it's a game that I quite enjoyed even after playing F.E.A.R 1 and 2 back to back. Yes, it changed a few key aspects of the first, but I personally think it improved on a lot of things as well. So let's take a decade look back at F.E.A.R 2 Project Origin. F.E.A.R 2 follows directly after the events of the first game. In fact, the beginning chapter of F.E.A.R 2 takes place in tandem with the ending chapter of F.E.A.R 1. The ending of the first game resulting in a massive explosion at the Origin facility, the same explosion that you get caught in at the end of the intro in F.E.A.R 2. The story of the entire F.E.A.R trilogy revolves around the creepy little girl named Alma. Obviously not just a regular little girl who's a little creepy. No, Alma is a supernatural being that is set on revenge for all those who ever wronged her. She tears into people's minds and she alters reality as she pleases. The first game you play as Point Man, a silent protagonist who is revealed to actually be the son of Alma. The second game you play as Michael Beckett, a Delta Force operator whose squad was sent in to arrest a woman named Genevieve Aristide shortly before the explosion mentioned earlier set off by Point Man in the first game. The game starts out creepy, with visions of Alma and general paranormal tomfoolery happening. Beckett ends up in the hospital after the explosion, where Genevieve alters his reflexes to be superhuman, pretty much so he can use slow-mo bullet time powers similar to Point Man in the first game. You set out to escape the hospital, losing some of your squad mates in the process. The team you do have left decides to group up with a man named Snake Fist. He reveals he knows a weapon that can be used to stop Alma, located in the base within a nuclear reactor. You fight through waves of enemies to reach the reactor, where Genevieve, the old hag, shows up again and reveals she operated on you to use you as bait for Alma, because she wants to capture Alma instead of kill her, so she can use the paranormal little girl as leverage. Your partner, Stokes, is reasonably upset by this. She tries to retaliate. Genevieve shoots her shortly before Alma shows up. Alma puts you in a dream state where you fight off ghosts of one of your squad mates, all as merely a distraction, because as you're fighting this guy in your mind, Alma is raping you. And the game ends after she turns and shows her now impregnated belly, making you reach out and touch it. Needless to say, the plot of the game is a wild ride and it ends in another. You get this scary chick stalking you and scaring the shit out of you all game, and then she shows up and rapes you while you're tied to a chair. If this game was released in 2019, I think the backlash behind that alone would bankrupt the company. But the story isn't bad. It flowed great and the voice acting throughout was actually top notch. I don't think the plot is what people hated about this game, so let's move into the reason that it was hated so much. F.E.A.R 2 maintains the core elements of the first game. You got Reflex, which is the slow-mo combat. You have a melee system that consists of various martial arts attacks. And finally, the game has advanced enemy AI. The final one of these things being the reason behind F.E.A.R 1's success and what made it such a pivotal title in gaming history. The AI tops most FPS games of today. The enemies you face will take cover, they'll flank your position, they'll throw grenades to flush you out of cover, they'll retreat back if the fight is going south to get better cover and re-engage you. They have voice comms communicating information between them. They'll say things like, "We lost them," or "Grenade out," or "There's 2 of us down, fall back." It's really enjoyable to kill these bastards. The first F.E.A.R game played like Max Payne, a John Woo movie, and Japanese horror themes were all thrown into a blender, and the concoction we got was F.E.A.R. F.E.A.R was loved for its AI, like I said, but that love doesn't end there. The environment was incredibly interactive during the combat. After a fight, you'll see bullet holes in the wall, blood splattered everywhere, papers that were shot are now shredded and raining from the sky like confetti, dust from the walls, glass everywhere from the windows and doors. If a fire extinguisher was shot, the room was filled with a heavy gray smoke. It was just beautiful, over-the-top action where the influences of John Woo are very apparent. The gun design was minimal in the game, but it was great and satisfying to use. So, what changed from F.E.A.R 1 to F.E.A.R 2? F.E.A.R 2 was undeniably targeted at a more broad consumer. Console gamers to be exact. And most of these things that were changed is what many reviews criticized in the game. The combat is much more open, more arcadey, more Call of Duty you can say. F.E.A.R 1 had small squads of enemies at a time, maybe 5 to 6 guys. In F.E.A.R 2, it's not uncommon to get waves of enemies in each situation. F.E.A.R 1 had a lean feature that I really enjoyed, but they replaced that in F.E.A.R 2 with an aim down sight feature, which was not in F.E.A.R 1, and to me personally, I take aiming down the sights every day. That was one of my biggest gripes with the first game. I love ADS and FPS games. I saw plenty of complaints that the AI was dumbed down, but that's just not true. The AI had the same exact programming as the first game. I think that the level layout being a little more open, not real close quarters like the first, left the AI with a little less options at looking as tactical as it did in the first. Of the criticisms I saw, the two I agree with are the ones with changes to the atmosphere of the game. F.E.A.R 1 was creepy and paced much better to keep you on edge the entire game. F.E.A.R 2 was first and foremost a shooter. The action was so prevalent that you almost forget that it's a horror game sometimes. So the horror in the second game is more jump scary than general psychological unsettledness of the first. And second, the heads-up display. The first game was immersive and minimalist, which if you've seen my videos on the Metro or Dead Space games, you'll know that I love dearly when games integrate a minimal UI and heads-up display. F.E.A.R 2 had this gaudy outline over the screen that looks like something off Borderlands or something. That paired with a film grain filter and an awful head bob, the game just lost a lot of immersion points for me, and it takes away from the horror element as well. There are a lot of things that the second game excelled at though. I personally enjoyed the gun design in the second game a whole lot more than the first. The guns were much more detailed and thought through, the reload animations were slick, and the sounds were much better than the first game, especially regarding the shotgun. That paired along with being able to aim down sights, the implementation of hit markers, and you could also change the firing modes on some weapons in the second game, so I was very pleased with the guns in F.E.A.R 2. They were satisfying to use, and I feel like that's job number one for an FPS game. Also like the variety of grenades available in the second game. Rather than the frag and 2 useless ones from the first game, you're given both incendiary and shock grenades to add a little more variety to how you want to take the lives of your enemies. You can also cook the grenades that have better control on where and when they explode. I also like the ability to have HP pickups as well, so you don't have to waste a medkit every time you're missing only a little portion of health. The AI is still enjoyable. They take cover, they flush you out with grenades, they voice communicate to each other, and yet it doesn't feel as crisp as the first, but still remarkable in comparison to the vast majority of FPS games of the time, and even modern ones today. Lastly, although the horror in the game wasn't psychological, the game was still scary. In fact, I think I got scared more times in the second game than I did in the first, simply because it was more in your face than the now you see me, now you don't type horror from the first game. Here's my favorite scares from both games. It'll give you the idea of the types of horror in each. One aims to make you uncomfortable, like the horror in Silent Hill, and 2 makes you just shit your pants.
Nice of you to join us, sunshine.
F.E.A.R 2 Project Origin was a fantastic game, and on its own, I think it would be regarded as one of the best games of 2009. The fact that it had to follow up a literal masterpiece made it tough to shine because of all the comparison that was inevitable to happen. I think in the long run, it wasn't smart to pander to the audience of console gamers, because that's the reason they changed most of the things they changed. And the original F.E.A.R was a PC exclusive, and it played like it. F.E.A.R 2 was a spooky Call of Duty game, but the combat was much more enjoyable than Call of Duty, and the plot was actually good and not just filler script for shooting waves of enemies. I really enjoyed the two games back to back. The second game still holds up graphically today. It looks and runs beautifully. The game that really sucks is F.E.A.R 3. It's an objectively bad game, but it's tolerable if you really want to see how the story ends. I want to dive into the third game a little more, maybe in a separate video at some point if you guys are interested. As always, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed your time here, give me a little like on the video, it means a lot. Also subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future. I do video game retrospectives and gaming focused video essays, so if you're into that sort of thing, check out some of my other videos on the channel. I cover everything from Wario Land to Silent Hill. Hope to see you next time. Peace.
Everybody let me hear you say, oh yeah, I hold your hands in the air and wait for my, you just don't